What's up, everybody? Welcome back. We're here with some more MMA DFS picks for DraftKings for UFC Atlantic City. Erin Blanchfield and Manon Fiorot. Best bets, tips, lineup strategies, FanDuel, and DraftKings. Everything you need for sports betting and DFS for this UFC Atlantic City card. Welcome. I am Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy, joined once again, as always, by Jake the Snake, owner of MMADFS.com. Jake, what's happening, man?
Not a whole lot, man. Interesting, big card, lots of fights, lots of stuff to break down. Could be a fun one.
Absolutely. So we have 14 fights on the card, and we're going to try to talk about all of them. So what we do in these videos, if you're new here, we break down the main event from a betting and DFS perspective. We analyze the fighters making their UFC debut. That is three of them on this card. We play good fighter, good matchup, bad matchup, a segment, a little game that we created for fighters that have less than four fights in the UFC. Give some context to their stats, a little more DFS context to whether or not we should be playing him on this particular slate. And then we'll give out a fight that you have to target in DFS, favorite underdog play of the week, and our stream parlay of the week, which we just missed last week. By the way, Jake, I don't want to lean into this. Do you think Amanda Hebes could have won that decision, or do you think the judges got that one right?
I mean, it definitely wasn't a robbery. Could she have? Yeah, but I don't think she did. When I was watching it, I bet Hebus. I wanted her to win. I wasn't like super upset about it. I was like, okay, it was a close fight, but they're gonna give it to Rose. They gave it to Rose. It was. I was kind of surprised that it wasn't like 48s, 47s. I think there was like a 49-46. So I was kind of like, all right, that's weird. But nah, I mean, it wasn't a robbery. I don't know. I mean, it seemed like Rose did just barely enough to win.
I'm just saying because they robbed us of our second straight stream parlay. So we'll try to start another streak today. So stick around to the end of the show for that. Instead, let's talk about this week's main event, another female MMA matchup, Blanchfield versus Fior. Blanchfield is a favorite here, has put up some big scores in the past. Fior trending the opposite direction in terms of DFS scoring. But we can't deny these are two, probably a number one contenders fight, two extremely talented fighters. So, Jake, how do you see this one playing out for betting and DFS? We got Blanchfield 8,800 on DraftKings, Fior at 7,400.
Yeah, pretty interesting fight. They haven't officially announced it's a top contender fight, but everyone's kind of assuming that. So I mean, it seems fairly straightforward on the surface, at least. You get the wrestler and Blanchfield.
There you go.
Good start.
We haven't even got
24,
to, we haven't even got to the
24
hard
years
names
old.
yet, by the way. You tripped up on the very easiest name on the slate, probably.
I mean, I immediately go with Branchfield. So they're both 6-0 in the UFC, undefeated with the organization. It made sense to pair them up. Blanchfield is 24 years old to the 34 years old of Fiorot, so obviously experience is on Fiorot's side. Blanchfield will have the home crowd behind her. She's from Jersey. This is in Atlantic City. You could say that's more pressure for a young fighter. You could say it would help her. Like normally, if you have a wrestler pushing someone against the cage, the crowd's going to be booing. If they're the home favorite, there'll probably be a little bit less booing. Maybe the refs will let them stay on the cage longer in that situation. I don't know. I'm just speculating, but probably doesn't hurt that she'll have the home crowd behind her. Really good grappler. We did see her struggle to land takedowns in her last fight against Kyla Santos, where she went 0 for 14 on takedowns. Still won a 3-round decision, but not ideal. And Kyla Santos is a very similar body type to Fiorot, where you get this taller fighter, long legs, really good takedown defense. Fiorot's actually an inch taller than Santos, so you can kind of see some similarities there, where it was just hard for the shorter Blanchfield to kind of get under and take her down. They always you like hear people compare it to like taking down a table. You just like the legs just they land upright whenever you have a shorter wrestler going to the taller fighter. Maybe not whenever, but in certain situations. But anyways, back to Blanchfield. Generally, she's scored really well. She averaged 107 DraftKings points in her 6 UFC wins. She's coming off her worst performance, which not great coming into this, but she has shown tons of potential when she can get fights to the ground. Really good with submissions, and it's not like she can't strike. Like we saw her strike with Jessica Andrade. Like she held her own on the feet there, but if this fight stays standing, I think we're gonna want to be holding the Fiorot tickets because she is the superior striker. She's bigger, taller, longer, more experienced on the feet. She's got a bunch of knockouts and TKOs. I'd be surprised if Fiorot knocked out Blanchfield. So I think, Fiorot's path to victory is going to be to outland her way to a decision win. I do think Fiorot has kind of underrated wrestling, like not just her takedown defense, but you can go back and watch, like, she's been in a 5-round fight before, whereas Blanchfield hasn't. And you can go back and watch that last fight of Fiorot earlier in her career, and she was still wrestling in the 5th round, like looking for submissions in that fight. So she's not just a striker. Like, she's really strong, really powerful. We've seen her land takedowns against people that can grapple, hold top position. Like, I think she's pretty well rounded, even if striking is really her forte. So it's not like she's going to be completely lost if she gets taken down, I don't think. So even if Blanchfield lands a takedown or two, it's still going to be competitive. So I think it's going to be a good fight. And I came into the breakdown thinking I was going to be betting Blanchfield finishing props. Like, when the week started, I was like, oh, Blanchfield, going against the striker. She's historically landed submissions in these spots. And the more I looked at it, the more I was like, man, Fiorot can actually hang in some of these clinch and grappling exchanges. And I really think she's going to win the striking exchanges. So I actually ended up switching, and I picked Fiorot to win by decision here. And like, that was like going against any bias I came in with. So I think she's in a decent spot. I don't think it's like an easy pick or anything. It's probably like a 60-40, 55-45 spot or something, where if Blanchfield can dominate on the mat, then she's going to end up winning, and she'll have like maybe some hometown cooking. But if Fiorot can keep it standing, man, I really like her in this spot. I think she can score pretty well on both sides just through volume alone over 5 rounds. That's a lot of time to work with. And then, she's pretty high volume. She's averaging 6.05 significant strikes landed per minute and only 3.31 absorbed per minute. So really good striking differential. She can mix in wrestling. She'll look for takedowns. I don't know if she'll try to take Blanchfield down, but, theoretically that could add to her scoring. At her cheap price tag, it's hard to see Fiorot getting left out in a win. She's only 7,400 on DraftKings, $16 on FanDuel. Her style is better suited towards FanDuel, so I really like her over there at $16. She could put up a really big striking total here. And if we're looking at low risk contests, I definitely think you stack it. I think there's a good chance it runs long. It's negative 120 to go to a decision, so not like a prohibitive decision, but more likely than not, slightly. And I think that they're both going to score pretty well in that situation, where you're going to get a big combined score and you're going to want to stack in low risk. Definitely on DraftKings, you can do it. FanDuel didn't price this down. Like, the combined price is $37, whereas most fights are like 30 or 31. But it's such a weird slate without like a ton of great safe options that it's not impossible to stack it on FanDuel. We don't normally do that, and I'm not saying you have to, but you can at least play around with some builds that way and see what you think. In high risk, I think both fighters are in play. We talked last week about how female 5-round fights get left out far more often than the male 5-round fights. I think it was 9 of 19 going into last week, and Rose scored like 104 points and was left out of the winning DraftKings lineup. So now it's 9 of 20. But I think this is a higher upside one. I mean, it's always still possible that Blanchfield gets a finish, like a mid-round finish or something, scores like 98 points in a submission, gets left out. So that's probably how the fight busts. But I think whoever wins the decision, if it goes the distance, will probably be in the winner. If Fiorot wins by any method, she'll be in the winner. And if Blanchfield gets a well-timed finish, she'll be in the winner. So there's lots of ways that the winner of the fight is in winning tournament lineups. So I definitely want to have a good amount of exposure here.
For sure, all great points, great breakdown of the fight. Low risk contest, it does seem like the quintessential fight stack given the pricing and the likelihood of going 5 rounds. Fiorot, obviously, should be a high floor if it goes to a decision. Now, if she gets subbed in round 1 or 2, all bets are off. But it feels like a really great play in smaller field GPPs as well. Now, with 14 fights on the card, that does give some opportunities for a main event stack or a main event winner to be left out of especially the largest field GPP lineups. And we do have a decent amount of high upside underdogs here. So it's not completely out of the question that Fiorot wins and is left out. But again, if she does win, it does raise her odds of being in the optimal pretty significantly. And as we talk about the rest of these fighters on the card, you'll see some of the upside that we are talking about with some of these dogs. All right, let's talk about the newcomers, Jake. 3 making their first walk to the octagon. And as always, we'll start with the first fight of the night until the last fight of the night. Most of these are front loaded, but we have Angel Pacheco in the first fight of the night. And as we get to good fighter, bad matchup, bad matchup, we'll be talking about his opponent in pretty decent light here. But Pacheco, briefly, type of fighter he is, resume, fighting style, DFS potential.
Yeah, 32-year-old coming in 7-2, 100% finishing rate. Comes out of a tiny gym in Minnesota. Like Start BJJ is the name of it, where I guess that's where you start BJJ training. But he also splits training at the New England cartel, which I thought was sort of weird. Like you're in Minnesota and you're like, oh, where should I go train? I could go to California, I could go to Florida, I could go to New York, I could go to Denver. Nah, I'm gonna go to New England.
Right.
It just seems like most of those guys are kind of regional. So it seems like an odd choice, but whatever. Who knows like why he picked there. But I'm not like huge on the New England cartel in general, but obviously they have Cater and Font, and then some smaller guys that fight in like CES and stuff. But anyways, back to Pacheco. He's coming off a crazy high volume decision loss to Danny Silva on Contender Series. So we actually talked about him not long ago. Well, we talked about Silva, about the beating that Silva put on Pacheco on Contender Series. He landed 204 significant strikes on Pacheco in that fight. Pacheco landed a ton of volume too. His ear almost got punched off. It was a crazy brawl. They signed both guys because of that, but normally see these guys coming off losses getting contracts. So, I mean, that is a little bit of a red flag for him. It's like, oh, you put on a great fight. You didn't win, didn't even win a round, but you put on a great fight. So we're going to give you a contract anyway. Now he's cutting down to 135 pounds for the first time in his career. I think that's always kind of concerning when you have someone that fought at 145 and even as high as 155. Now they're making their debut and they're trying to make a brand new weight cut for the first time. So you never know how that's going to go. It did seem like he was carrying a little bit of extra weight. So I don't think it's like a death cut for him, but definitely another red flag there. He has no defense, no wrestling defense, no striking defense. He's an all offense fighter. He got dropped in the first round in each of his last two fights. So add that to the cardio and durability concerns with the additional weight cut. Really just seems like, they're giving him a shot because it was a good fight, not necessarily because of how good of a fighter he is. So, yeah, not super excited about playing this guy, but very excited about playing his opponent.
As we'll get to here in a second. And next, we have Ibo Aslan. He's fighting Anton Turkalj, which somehow, this is a rematch. These two fought not too long ago outside of the UFC. Incredibly rare. But again, talk to me about Ibo Aslan, Jake, his resume, his fighting style, and his DFS potential.
Yeah, super weird when you get a rematch in the debut. It's like, who are they doing a favor for here?
Right.
The guy that lost or the guy that won that fight?
Yeah.
So 27-year-old Turkish KO specialist, 12-1, all 12 of his wins by knockout, 11 in round one. I mean, I think that's generally a red flag when you see that. You're like, oh, okay, all of his knockouts come in the first 5 minutes. Guy probably has terrible cardio, which in fact is the truth. If you go back and watch the fight against Turkalj the first time, he was doing okay, and then Aslan just gassed out in round two, gets taken down, immediately subbed. Definitely didn't look like he had very good cardio in that spot. Obviously, since so many of his fights ended in round one, we don't have many situations to look at to gauge his cardio, but that was the one that kind of stood out to me. So he's coming off a round one knockout on Contender Series, and this is where the beginning of his fraudulent record begins, because it was this terrible opponent who was coming down from heavyweight, and the guy lost a decision a year earlier on Contender Series to Jamal Pogues. So I'd already known who that guy was. Oh, this guy's awful. Oh, and then he's moving down, and of course he gets knocked out immediately. That guy's fought as low as 170 pounds in the past. So he was just like a light guy that put on a ton of weight, and then they just needed a punching bag. So in steps him. So then going deeper into the fraudulent record of Aslan, his 3 wins before Contender Series. So here are the 3 guys he fought. 5'9" opponent who came in with a 5-9 pro record and on a 7-fight losing streak. A 42-year-old opponent who came in on a 5-fight losing streak with an 18-21 pro record, and another 5'9" opponent who was 44 years old, came in on a 4-fight losing streak with a 6-7 pro record. Those 3 opponents are currently on a combined 28-fight losing streak. And those are the 3 guys that got him a shot on Contender Series after losing to Turkalj. So that's like the only 3 guys he fought between losing to Turkalj with Brave FC, which is the only time this guy fought outside of Austria, which he's Turkish, but fighting in Austria, which is sort of weird. Whatever. And the one time he went to a legitimate organization, he gets submitted by Turkalj, who's 0-3 in the UFC. Then the guy fights these like a bunch of taxi drivers, goes on Contender Series, fights another guy that has no business being there, and then they're like, you're in. So yeah, what could go wrong? Powerful puncher, terrible cardio, has never fought anyone decent. Yeah, he can hit hard, he can kick hard, probably on a full bucket of steroids. But yeah, I mean, it looks like a total fraud. Definitely a scary guy to fade, but a scary guy to play. So it's kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't. I don't know, man. Seems like he'll be popular and just screams fraud to me.
Well, we love fading those guys. We don't love it for our long-term health, as we don't breathe for the first 5 minutes of the first round. But I gotta agree with you, Jake. When you look at his ownership on a 14-fight card, it definitely screams like a potential fade spot in his debut. All right, finally we have, and I gotta find who it is. It is, there he is, Connor Matthews making his debut against Dennis Bazukia. Is he good or bad? What's his resume? We don't have a very high bar right now for other debuters on the card. So is he the best debuter of the bunch?
I mean, he might be by default, but I don't know. So this guy, I can't get a great feel for him because he comes in, he's 31 years old, 7-1, one knockout, five submissions. So it's like, cool, he's got six finishes, bunch of first round finishes, but he's been fighting like the absolute lowest competition. Got a win over Jay Ellis. Anytime you see that, you're like, oh, Jay Ellis, cool, 15-97 pro record or 16-109, depending on where you look. Like, if you fought Jay Ellis, like you'd be better off just not having that fight because it's an immediate red flag for anyone that's fought Jay Ellis. He's just a stat patter. So that's one of Connor Matthews' wins, and you're like, all right, well, that's not a great look. It's like, all right, what else have you done? All right, so he went on Contender Series the first time, got absolutely dominated by Francis Marshall, lost every round of the fight, just absolutely destroyed. And then he went back to the New England regional scene, which not the most heralded regional scene, and he gets a quick submission, comes back on Contender Series, fights like a 10-0 Brazilian guy, which okay, like that's more impressive. The guy only had like one fight in the last 4 years or something, and it was pretty close fight where the broadcast was like, yeah, we don't know who won, but I mean, it was a good fight, high volume fight. If it was a DFS fight, we'd be like, that was a great fight. Like you landed like 7 takedowns, tons of volume, pushing the pace. Great for DFS scoring. But you're just watching this guy, and like he seems like he's in great shape, and he makes the most out of everything he has. He seems like he's well rounded, but he just seems like half a step behind a lot. Like when you see him face someone like Francis Marshall, it's a little too slow, like a little too weak. His cardio is a little too bad, but I can't really put my finger on it because he'll wrestle, he'll strike, he looks like he's in amazing shape. It's just like he's not quite athletic enough being the best guys in the world, but he's like pretty well trained. He used to be in the Air Force. He's disciplined. Like I don't know, maybe he'll look great. He gets a really favorable matchup here, and I think they're trying to build him up. Like they were doing like a docu series or something on him. I don't know if it's because he's part of the Air Force. I didn't really watch it, but he's a New England cartel guy, and that always is a little bit concerning because we get these like lower tier from that gym, and they're just kind of the filler guys, and they're fighting CES against a bunch of people that shouldn't be fighting competitively. So it's hard to trust them. I wouldn't trust any of his finishes, and the two times he's fought more legitimate opponents, they both went the distance. Uh, so like, I don't really trust his finishing ability, but for DFS, he looks interesting just based on wrestling and pace, and he gets a good matchup. And he's cheap, he's an underdog. He's probably going to be popular because the line has been moving in his favor. He's 7,800 on DraftKings and he's negative 105. So it's definitely going to drive his ownership up some, but with a big slate, the ownership spread out. And Bazooka looks pretty terrible. So you have to like the matchup here.
Fair enough. And just really quickly on that point, you mentioned ownership. I looked maybe a couple of hours ago. Only 3 or 4 fighters that we looked at as we consider high owned, right? Blanchfield. We talked about Aslan. Anybody else that fits that mold that's going to be high owned? Malkoon maybe?
Yeah, Malkoon's the third person. It's just the three of them. Yeah, because I mean we have 28 fighters, so ownership is pretty spread out.
Cool. All right, let's play good fighter, good matchup, bad matchup. We will limit these answers to one sentence only, good or bad. And I'm just going to ask Jake simply, is this fighter actually good or bad for DFS? Is this a good or bad matchup on this particular slate? And again, these are for fighters that have less than 4 fights in the UFC. We will start from the first fight of the night. You can probably guess this, but we got Kylan Lochran. He's up against Pacheco. I assume this is a good matchup. And he had a tough go in his debut, first loss. But I think maybe if you just look at box scores, maybe not many people know how good Taylor Lapilus is, 0-2 in the UFC. But tough matchup for him. Is Lochran good or bad, and can he capitalize on this bad matchup, on this good matchup?
Yeah, I mean, not only is Lapalus good, but that matchup got put together on like 3 days' notice after his original opponent like couldn't make weight, and they just did all these musical chairs. So I mean, that was like the toughest spot you could ask for, which is good for keeping his ownership lower because this is like a dream matchup. And I think he's good. He's definitely good for DFS. You know, lots of takedowns, lots of ground and pound, lots of finishes, and he's just getting an absolute dream matchup here.
Let's not forget the last time Jake called something a dream matchup. It was 7 days ago. It was Fernando Padilla, and he put up 115 DraftKings points. So let's take note here. All right, next we have Victoria Dudikova. And again, I know I said one sentence. I kind of teed you up with like 5 sentences last time, so that's my bad. Is Victoria Dudikova good or bad? Is this a good or bad matchup against Melissa Gatto?
Yeah, I think she's bad, and she's moving up to 125 for the first time. Gatto used to fight at 135, so I think there's going to be a physicality difference. So I think it's a bad fighter and a bad matchup.
All right, next we do have Turkali. We talked about Aslan. I assume we think he is bad. Is this a good matchup for Turkali, and is he as bad as his game logs indicate?
I mean, I think he's bad. I don't think he's as bad as his game logs indicate because he's had a brutal schedule. I mean, just
That's
really tough.
crazy.
Like
Yeah.
Almeida, Petrino, and then Pedro. And now he's 0-3, and he's fighting for his job against the guy he's already beat once. And I think, if Aslan's as big a fraud as I think he is, then it's a great matchup for a second round finish because this guy should gas out. He just has to survive for 5 minutes. He's got a 0 point floor, but he's got a high ceiling.
All right. Next, we have Bazookia. We talked about his opponent, Matthews. Bazookia also 0-2 in the UFC, just full of great fighters on this card. Is he good or bad? Is this a good or bad matchup against Matthews?
Yeah, he's a bad fighter, but it's a good matchup, man. Matthews is very heavy on offense, not great on defense, and he's definitely gonna be pushing the pace.
I think we got Bazookia less than 10% projected ownership due to the line flip. So anytime we can look to get and take advantage of a lower owned fighter in tournaments, we have to take note there. Next we have Herbert Burns. Unfortunately, has 4 fights in the UFC. Let's keep moving. We have Reese McKee, which should be a very interesting fight. The fight that is the most favored to end inside the distance. He's also 0-3. Is he as unlucky in terms of strength of schedule as Turkali? And how's his matchup with Njokuani?
Yeah, I mean McKee's a bad fighter, but he's good for DFS because he just had crazy volume. He gets hit a ton. He's always pushing the pace. Just terrible defensive wrestling, but it's a good matchup because Chidi's a striker. He's not going to be wrestling, and Chidi's a gasser, and Chidi's coming down from 185 to 170 for the first time since 2016. And he said he damaged his vocal cords from cutting weight to 170 in like a 2018 interview. So he also said he was never going to cut down there again. So clearly he changed his mind after losing 3 straight. So I think it's a bad fighter and a good matchup for McKee.
Yeah, and it's not funny. I mean, weight cuts are no joke. I did laugh during that, but that's just a crazy. I've never heard that before. So if anyone out there knows about weight cuts, please comment below. Let us know how that could possibly happen, or if you're in the medical fields, let us know how that could possibly happen. All right, finally, we have a matchup of two guys who fall into this category: Cedric Dumas and Nursultan Ruziboev. Are either of these guys good or bad? Is this a good or bad matchup for either?
I think they're both bad, and I actually think it's kind of like a sneaky bad matchup. They're both low volume. Like Dumas refuses to make smart decisions, and Ruziboev is like he just wants to go for Kimuras constantly. I know he just got a knockout, but man, I think this is going to be like I don't think the winner scores all that well. I'm hesitant to say that because I realize it's like theoretically high upside. I just see it as low volume. Neither guy shoots for many takedowns. Like it's gonna need a first round finish to really score well, and we could get a potential staring contest. But it's definitely gonna be a sweat if you fade it because one guy's a giant who like is strong and has good submissions. Another guy is just like a complete wild card.
Yeah, that's. I think that's an accurate description. All right, before we close out the show with our fight that you have to target in DFS, favorite underdog play of the week, and our stream parlay of the week, let's not forget that if you want that extra edge in betting or DFS for UFC, make sure you check out Jake's site, MMADFS.com, with his sheet, which breaks down every fight from betting and DFS perspective, his premium content. He talks about a lot of the bets that he gives out. Oftentimes, they're ahead of the line moves. Make sure you get that access early in the week at his site. OccupyFantasy.com, you can get our daily plug, top plays, lineup strategies, Jake's remaining best bets of the week. Occupy model ranks every fighter, FanDuel and DraftKings with Jake's projected ownership, as well as our lineup builder allows you to build up to 300 lineups for every UFC DFS slate. If you're not already, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We do these videos every Friday or Saturday. Subscribing is the best way to get notified whenever we go live or publish these videos. Plus, it's like the easiest, like bare minimum way to support the channel. If you like what we do, just click subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. It's easy. And give us a thumbs up. Both those things are super easy way to support. You don't want to go to our sites. We understand. You just want to watch free videos. That's cool. Just support us with a thumbs up and a subscription. Easy. All right. Underdog. You see the promo code here. Use promo code Occupy if you haven't signed up already. 100% deposit match bonus up to $100. Jake, what is your favorite underdog play of the slate?
So they have Loughran over 0.5 finishes. I think that's pretty decent. His inside the distance line is like -135. So it's not like a complete free automatic one, but man, I really think he finishes Pacheco here. So yeah, I'm going to go over on that one.
All right. And we've talked about a lot of different fights. There's some we haven't covered, but which one stands out to you as the fight that you have to target in DFS? We're going to exclude the main event here. Whoever wins is likely to score extremely well, likely to be in the optimal lineup.
Yeah, I think it's the Cheaty McKee fight. It's either Cheaty gets an early knockout or else he gasses and McKee finishes him in the later round.
All right. Easy enough there. And we'll close out with our stream parlay. I promise I'm not just being lazy and taking main event underdogs here, but I think the opportunities have presented themselves each of the last 3 weeks. I'm going to continue that theme here. I'm going to pick a side total or prop. Jake will choose one as well. We will parlay it together. We're looking for 2 out of 3 in the last 3 weeks. I'm going to go Fiorot decision here, plus 330. Really think it's a great bet. Jake talked about why earlier in the show. If you missed it or you just spaced out, go rewind back to the beginning. So plus 330 from my side, Jake. What are you going to pair it with?
Yeah, kind of on that last note of the fight to target. I'm gonna go McKee round 2 or round 3 KO at plus 550. His money line is plus 115 right now. Like implies like a 44% chance of winning. I don't see 2/3 of that not being a late knockout. I think it's like that's backwards. Like most of his win condition is waiting for Cheaty to gas out and then land a late knockout. He's never won a decision in his career. He barely ever submits anyone. Like he's not insanely powerful where he's going to get a quick knockout. So like, I don't know, man. Those lines should be a lot closer in my mind. So if we pair those together, that's going to be plus 26.95 on the parlay.
Plus 26.95. Let's get it. We've been looking for electric scooter type parlays. It's a mid-size sedan parlay here. Plus 26.75. You want all the bets, Jake's got MMADFS.com. You want more DFS advice, OccupyFantasy.com. That will do it for this video. If you have any questions, our Discord server is the best way to reach us. We're in there, at ungodly hours in pretty much every slate. So OccupyFantasy.com/Discord. Link is in the description below. If you have any questions, you want to stay on YouTube, you don't want to leave this screen, don't want to leave this app, drop a comment below. We will happily answer them. The slate doesn't lock until 7 p.m. Eastern, so we got almost 24 hours to answer your questions. So we'd love to hear from you. Let's see if we can get as many comments as we can in this video. Drop an opinion, fact, if you have a fact, question about the slate, drop it below, and we'll get back to you. So for Jake, I am Brian. Thank you for listening, and good luck at UFC Atlantic City.